It's time again to take your place at the edge of your seat. I'm Lurkst. First of all, we'll be looking at two films that came out last weekend before looking ahead to a new film that's coming out this weekend. Darkest Hour will be remembered, in all likelihood, as that film that got Gary Oldman an Oscar. And whilst it's entirely relevant to talk about his performance, we'll get to that in a moment. I think it's also important to talk about the film as a whole. Apart from the man himself, there are wonderful performances from Kristen Scott Thomas as his wife Clemmy, and Ben Mendelsohn as George VI. Colin Firth who? It's a snapshot of the time between Churchill's appointment as Prime Minister up to Operation Dynamo and the Dunkirk evacuation. It comes to us courtesy of director Joe Wright, who most will know from Pride and Prejudice and Atonement. He does a sterling job here, getting the most out of mostly cramped settings. The war rooms, backs of cabs, tube stations, and giving things a visual flair beyond the standard biopic. Often the title is taken quite literally, with murky palettes and encroaching black surroundings. This just amplifies a script that's best moments look at the loneliness and the uncertainty of power, especially in times of crisis, and it's this that makes Oldman's performance worth talking about. Yes, his voice is uncanny, yes, his physicality and makeup is commendable, but it's the vulnerability and the fallibility he brings to the role that's outstanding. The film understandably does skirt over some of the worst of Churchill's character, but he's not lionised either. Here he is a bombastic but flawed human being, a powerhouse of the personal, even as his famous witticisms and speeches to the House of Commons do remind us of the public face of the man. I'll be upfront about this. I've not actually seen any of the Insidious films, I know. Friends have recommended them, and I love me a good horror, as you can tell from my 2017 list. But for whatever reason, I've just never got around to them. So it's entirely possible that my opinion on this film is completely worthless. But I'll give it anyway. The last key centres around the psychic Elise returning to the site of the first haunting she ever experienced, her childhood family home. There she must battle both literal and mental demons as she confronts the past. Elise is played charmingly by Lynn Shay, who honestly just carries the whole film. Her performance makes Elise a captivating character to follow in the present, or, well, actually is set in 2010, and explore in the past. There didn't seem to be anything especially new in terms of the script or the direction, but it was done well enough to be enjoyable, despite some jump scare cliches. And aside from a few obvious references to films I've not seen, I found it all pretty easy to pick up and get invested in. My only issue with the film was the comedy aspect, which I found pretty cringeworthy most of the time, to be honest, but the rest was good enough that I'll definitely give the first three a watch, even if I'm not rushing out to buy them. 12-year-old Miguel wants to be a musician like his idol, Ernesto de la Cruz, but family tradition dictates he become a shoemaker instead. Things come to a head on the Day of the Dead festival, and with the barrier between life and death at its weakest, Miguel crosses into the land of the dead to find out where this hatred of musicians comes from, and to get his ancestors' blessing to follow his dream. It's worth pointing out that this is not the first high-profile animated film centering in this idea to come out in the last decade. If you haven't seen The Book of Life, do, it's exceptional. But it isn't the rip-off that I feared. This is a beautiful sugar rush of Mexican culture, but with a deep, beating heart of family life. This is reflected in the chosen title, Coco. Not the main character, not even one of the dead ancestors, but Miguel's maternal grandmother. The familial link between both worlds. It's a film about compromise between generations, embracing the benefits of the new and the traditional. That, of course, leads to some of the most emotional Pixar scenes since Inside Out. And I'd honestly compare it favourably with that excellent film. It's been out in the States since Thanksgiving, but we finally got it here in the UK this weekend. So get the family together and just go see it. That's all for now, folks. Join us next week when we'll be looking at The Commuter and The Post. I'm off for a shit.
Don't say shit like that! And please, God, don't follow says.